Kentucky is the only state without provision on what happens if the penalty phase of the trial results in a hung jury. Thus, the Kentucky Supreme Court ruled that in cases that end with a hung jury, the judge must order a penalty retrial, applying the common law rule for mistrial. Kentucky, officially the Commonwealth of Kentucky, is a landlocked state in the southeastern region of the United States. It borders Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio to the north, West Virginia to the northeast, Virginia to the east, Tennessee to the south, and Missouri to the west. Its northern border is defined by the Ohio River. Its capital is Frankfort, and its most populous city is Louisville. As of 2024, the state's population was approximately 4.6 million. All sentences of death are automatically appealed to the Kentucky Supreme Court. Death sentences shall, in theory, be carried out on the fifth Friday following the affirmation of the sentence by the Supreme Court. However, if the sentence is not carried out because of stays or any other reason, the governor may appoint another day of execution and may continue to do so until the sentence is carried into effect. The governor also has the sole power of clemency with respect to death sentences. Despite remaining a legal penalty, there have been no executions in Kentucky since 2008, and only 3 since 1976. The most recent execution was of Marco Allen Chapman, who was executed for 2 murders. Marco Allen Chapman was born on September 4, 1971. Marco Allen Chapman was a native of West Virginia. Marco Allen Chapman's parents were alcoholics. Marco Allen Chapman's father sexually abused him, and would sometimes beat him until he went unconscious. Marco Allen Chapman was abused by both parents. Chapman's mother whacked him many times in the head with a skillet. Chapman was suicidal as a child, which is the reason he began abusing drugs. Chapman suffered from depression, suffered from flashbacks and hallucinations, and, according to a court motion, showed symptoms of bipolar disorder. On the morning of August 23, 2002, Marco Chapman murdered a 7-year-old girl and a 6-year-old boy in their home in Warsaw, Kentucky. Both of the children's throats had been slit, and they suffered multiple lacerations and stab wounds on their bodies. Their 10-year-old sister played dead after also being stabbed several times. The hands of the mother, Carolyn Marksberry, were bound with duct tape and she was tied to the bed frame. She was raped and stabbed in the chest with a knife that broke off in her chest. She was later stabbed with a larger knife and left for dead. In the brutal attacks, Chapman stabbed Cody Sharon, 6, and Chelbi Sharon, 7, to death. He tried to kill Courtney Sharon as well, stabbing her multiple times. But Courtney, who was 10 at the time, played dead until Chapman left and then fled to a friend's house nearby for help. Chapman had only thing in mind the day he attacked the family: money. There was no motivation for it. I think he went there with one purpose in mind: he needed money. He got there and had other ideas, and then needed to eliminate the witnesses. On the day of the attacks, Chapman arrived at Marksberry's home shortly after 4 a.m. He knocked on the door and told Marksberry that he was leaving the state. He asked to use her phone. Chapman then tied her up, raped her, stabbed her and her children, and robbed the family. The first dispatch call about trouble at the home came at 6 a.m. in a small town where everyone knew the Marksberries. Sharons. Warsaw was shaken to its core. It was a brutal, indescribable murders in this town. Marco Allen Chapman was arrested later the same day at 12:30 p.m. in Shrewsbury, West Virginia, approximately 8 hours after of the attack. Marco Allen Chapman was convicted of 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, rape, burglary and robbery. He was formally sentenced to death on December 14, 2004. The Kentucky Supreme Court set for oral arguments in the automatic appeal on April 12. Chapman, who has declined multiple interview requests, pleaded guilty in December 2004 to killing 7-year-old Chelbi Sharon and 6-year-old Cody Sharon in their home in the northern Kentucky community of Warsaw. Chapman also admitted attacking 10-year-old Cody Sharon, who played dead after being stabbed several times, then raping and trying to kill their mother, Carolyn Marksberry, during the August 2002 assault. A judge granted his request to be sentenced to death. What makes Chapman's case groundbreaking, lawyers said, was his decision to waive trial, sentencing by a jury, and nearly begged to be sentenced to death. Professors who teach criminal law have found Chapman's case, and its potential implications for future defendants, disturbing. Chapman was later indicted for 2 counts of capital murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of rape in the first degree, 1 count of burglary in the first degree, 1 count of robbery in the first degree, and 1 count of being a persistent felony offender in the second degree. Chapman's appointed counsel filed numerous pretrial motions, including a successful motion to change venue from Gallatin to Boone County. During pretrial proceedings, the trial court ordered Chapman to undergo the first of 3 competency evaluations at the Kentucky Correctional Psychiatric Center. After the first evaluation, the trial court conducted a hearing to determine Chapman's competency to stand trial. At that hearing, Dr. Stephen Free, a psychologist from KCPC, testified that Chapman had a history of mental health-related issues. But Dr. Free concluded that Chapman was competent to stand trial. And at the close of that hearing, the trial court ruled that Chapman was competent to stand trial. Not long after the first competency ruling, Chapman wrote a letter to the trial court in which he stated that he wanted to dismiss his attorneys, waive a jury trial and sentencing, plead guilty to all the charges, and be sentenced to death. In that letter, Chapman expressed remorse for his crimes and stated that he was willingly ready to accept the sentence of death, because that is the only acceptable sentence for the crimes I have against and humanity itself. The trial court then ordered Chapman back to KCPC for a second competency evaluation. At the final sentencing hearing, the Commonwealth presented brief testimony to establish the essential underlying facts of the case, including testimony by Marksberry. The trial court reiterated to Chapman its belief that Chapman was making a mistake in firing his attorneys and waiving his right to jury sentencing or trial. But the trial court acknowledged to Chapman that there was no legal authority preventing him from pleading guilty and seeking death. The trial court observed that rejecting the death sentence in the plea agreement would likely prompt Chapman to withdraw his guilty plea only to ask a jury to sentence him to death. The trial court then stated that it had read a psychological report delivered to Chambers by standby counsel containing mitigation evidence. The trial court made clear that it had considered the content of the report for Chapman's competency. The trial court stated that it had not considered the mitigation evidence because Chapman did not want to present any mitigation evidence. On November 21, 2008, Marco Allen Chapman was executed. His execution marked the 165th for the Kentucky State Penitentiary in Eddyville, Kentucky, which opened in 1886. In 1911 the prison carried out death sentences by electrocution. Through 1997, 163 inmates were executed in the electric chair. In 1998 Kentucky changed the law to mandate lethal injection as the primary means to execute an inmate on death row. His final meal was a medium-rare 32-ounce steak, shrimp, salad and banana creme pie. And his final words was, "I don't know why I did the thing that I did, and I know the hate of me over that night must be overwhelming, But Carolyn and Courtney, you have to know that wasn't who I was or am. Chapman wrote in a statement he gave to Warden Tom Simpson to read, "I am not a monster even though I did a monstrously evil thing. That is why I give my life willing as well as quickly in hopes that you know how truly sorry I am. I hurt and ache daily for the loss I've created in the Marksberry's family, but I hurt as well. I don't know if I deserve heaven after what I did, but I pray with all my heart that I find some sort of peace and happiness after my last breath." After Simpson read the statement, Chapman looked toward the room where Marksberry and family members were scheduled to view the execution, and apologized again. His voice shook, and he had tears in his eyes. Corrections Department employees on the execution team have already taken control of Chapman, moving him from his cell on death row to the execution building. And in preparation for the execution, Kentucky State Penitentiary and its 858 inmates will go on lockdown. Chapman has decided against having any family members or friends watch, as he is put to death. He also has chosen his last meal, which will be served to him 4 hours before his execution. The State Department of Corrections will not yet say what it will be. More than 50 media representatives have signed up to cover the execution. Chapman, 37, was to the death chamber at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time and strapped to a gurney, where needles was inserted into both arms before he is given 2 minutes for any last words. He received 3 injections. The first will put him to sleep, the second will paralyze his lungs, and the third will stop his heart. Chapman's execution was the state's first lethal injection since 1999, and only its second ever. There have been 164 men, from ages 16 to 71, executed at the Kentucky State Penitentiary since 1911. All but one, Eddie Harper in 1999, died in the electric chair. Thank you for watching Death Row.